Calaroga Shark Media.
Wow, I've been sitting on this first one. Hello, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. So, it was kind of Colbert's week, so I didn't think it was a good time to share with you this one that's been making the rounds on social media from currentaffairs.com. The headline, The Banal Horror of Jimmy Fallon. John Greenaway writes, there's a distinctive, deeply uncanny horror to the way Jimmy Fallon laughs. I'll jump in right there. My wife recently stumbled across a Fallon bit. And by the way, just to show you how much the normies don't pay attention to things, she starts telling me a story, and she says she was watching a clip with Jimmy Kimmel, and she said he seems really fake. And I went, Kimmel or Fallon? And then she realized she meant Fallon. So she's even mixing up the Jimmys. I digress. John Greenaway writes, there's a distinctive, deeply uncanny horror to the way Jimmy Fallon laughs. Look it up. There were literally hundreds of videos showing him breaking out into laughter at the slightest provocation. It is not a reaction. He sometimes won't even wait for his guests to get to their carefully scripted punchline. Rather, it is a performance, a sudden corporeal convulsion. Fallon leans in his chair as if pressed back by some unseen force. It's accompanied by the ritualistic slapping of the desk. You can picture this, right? As this guy nailed it. A sound that echoes like a gavel in a courtroom. Watching The Tonight Show in the deep hours of the night, beaming out from a phone screen or laptop. Wait, who's watching The Tonight Show on a phone? Or even a laptop? You people are doing this? There's an unshakable impression that this is not really entertainment, but a desperate kind of ritual. Fallon acts as the high priest of a terrified optimism. His rictus grin. What is rictus? I've never seen that word in my life. The Cambridge Dictionary says rictus is an expression in which someone shows their teeth in a smile but looks strange or in pain, rather than looking happy and relaxed. Okay, good use of words, sir. His rictus grin, serving as a shield against the encroaching silence of the real. Now, does this guy just know the word rictus? Or, was he like, how do you describe... I'd love to know how he even came across the word rictus. Again, I've never heard this word in my life. I think it's the perfect word for that sentence. I just want to know which came first, the chicken or the egg. His rictus grin, serving as a shield against the encroaching silence of the real. Here in the sanitized, overlit heart of the American culture industry, there is an inescapable horror. But it isn't a monster lurking in the shadows. It's in the manic, unblinking insistence that actually there are no shadows at all. If the Gothic tradition of fear teaches us that the ruins of the past haunt the present, The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon offers the inverse. A present so forcibly flattened, so aggressively quote-unquote fun, that it has exercised history entirely, leaving us trapped in a sterile, eternal loop of viral games and celebrity lip-syncing while the world slides into climate collapse and fascist politics. We are just getting started, and usually when I do these articles, I try not to read every word, but this is just amazing. Again, this is in Current Affairs, and you're going to look for The Banal Horror of Jimmy Fallon. A typical episode of Fallon's Tonight Show has the usual staples of the late-night format, the ones introduced by Steve Allen and perfected by Johnny Carson, an opening monologue, a couple celebrity interviews, a musical performance to close out the evening, but what's made Fallon so popular has been his use of endless, repetitive, shareable games. Night after night, he invites you to watch people you know from other shows on TV or who just coincidentally have a movie or an album to promote play Pictionary. Watch them lip sync battle. All right, I mean, yes, but what do you want him to have? Who's he supposed to have on? People that aren't promoting anything? People aren't going to do that. I have celebrity friends. I only ask them to come on when they're promoting something. Skipping ahead, watching The Tonight Show is an exercise in cultural déjà vu. It's the endless repetition of the already familiar in a setting that's designed to gain our attention but makes no other demand upon us as a viewer. The familiar cry of let people enjoy things might come in response, but this is what we're supposed to enjoy? Fallon presides over his rituals of play like a vampire, feeding not on blood but on enthusiasm. Boy, this is brutal. As I've said in the past, I worked with Jimmy a couple times. I shared a story recently. Someone used to send me some bits from the 12:30 show. I don't say I know Jimmy Fallon, but I've been in the room with Jimmy Fallon 2-3 times. I don't know, I'll call it 3 hours over the years. He was his public persona, very easy to work with. John Greenaway writes, he doesn't really converse with any of his guests. They all know what they're there for. Rather, he extracts. He demands relatability from them, draining the authenticity from the interaction until only the husk of a viral moment remains. The horror lies in the repetition, the feigned shock, the hysterical laughter at unfunny mishaps, the relentless golden retriever energy. It is a performance of joy so excessive, so desperate, that it reveals the void it attempts to cover. Again, let me remind you, there's only 2 11:30 shows now. It's this or Kimmel, and Kimmel's taking the summer off. It is the logic of the assembly line applied to human connection. What Fallon offers is a standardized production of quote-unquote fun that feels increasingly like a desperate plea to ignore the crumbling world outside the studio walls. Now do you see why I waited till Colbert was over to do this article? Skipping ahead, Fallon doesn't do politics, or if he does, he wants to keep his head down because we hit both sides equally. Tellingly, Donald Trump has called for the firing of almost all the other late-night hosts, Colbert, Kimmel, even Seth Meyers, but excluded Fallon from his hit list because Trump recognizes that there's nothing about Fallon's empty banality that could be anything close to a threat. Fallon is so desperate to keep the real world out in his interviews, he barely seems to be listening to his guests, waiting for them to finish speaking so his rituals can begin anew. Boy. Not totally unfair, but boy. The Guardian caught up with Robbie Hoffman. They quoted John Mulaney, who said, "Once in a while, you get to see a legend at the absolute top of their game." By the way, that was the first time I was able to go into a half-ass Mulaney impression without having to do my Fred Schneider setup. It's as big as a whale. Robbie talked about her tour and said, "All of us are going to live the life of happiness and pain and suffering and joy and all of it. I just don't think it's my job to spare anyone of anything necessarily. My job is just to be me. I'm trying to allow myself to be as me as possible." Sarah Sherman got a big-time profile in Newsweek. Sarah said, "Sarah Squirm is obviously the thing I'm most comfortable with. And I think that sometimes comes out on SNL, but it's also a less vulnerable persona. I don't know if I would have a career outside of doing bar shows as Sarah Squirm. Whenever I'm in a blonde wig on SNL, my friends call it Sarah Normal Activity. Because for people watching the show at home, that's more what a human being looks like, even though it's alien to all my friends. SNL's a really hard job. I always feel like it's the first day of the job every day, so if anyone's pitching me anything, I'm so open-minded, which pushes me into areas I necessarily wouldn't have thought of myself. I'll send Lewis, the head of special effects makeup, a crazy drawings and say, 'Can you make my eyeballs look like this?' And then in like 5 seconds, he already has a clay sculpture of my head with eyeballs bugging out. I feel like my range is so limited that anything that can help me expand my range is welcome. Even getting fangs for Nosferatu, it made me change my voice and my physicality. That's why I love hair, makeup, costume props so much, because they give you new things to play with that you wouldn't have come out of the gates with." As for being a shocking stand-up, she said, "I'm in an interesting position because I deal with a lot of repulsive subject matter, so I'm purposely repelling people away from me, whether it's talking about my butthole or looking like a freak. My form of artistic expression is repulsion, but ultimately I'm a comedian. I wanted to be a comedian my whole life. So there's a black bottomless void inside of me that needs constant validation because when I'm on stage, I do need to hear an audience laugh or I'm going to slice my own head off." Wow. The SFGate caught up with Ashley Padilla. She talked about working at a movie theater while a teenager and said, "I was a very bad employee. I didn't know what the schedule was like. Your schedule, I thought it was more of a decision on your own behalf. I was lost as hell. My mom was like, 'You're pretty funny. You could try, taking some comedy classes.' That led her to the UCB and the Groundlings. We all want to laugh, and my form of comedy is like, laugh at me. I'm an idiot. So I love performing kind of a dumbass. I think that makes people all over laugh. Thank God it's not really niche to California or New York. It's just like, are you a person who has experienced embarrassment? Then you'll love this." From Vanity Fair, the headline, "Red all over in the trenches with LA's comedy comrades." They talk about Joel Kim Booster doing a fundraiser for an LA City Council candidate who's been endorsed by the LA chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. Joel Kim Booster said, "Hopefully you'll laugh, but ultimately we need to make her a bit of money." Other folks on that show, Zainab Johnson, Nori Reed, and Chris Estrada. The SFGate says the tone of the show was unmistakably left. Joel Kim Booster asked a guy in the front row if the straight community ever says the word orgy. He asked the guy, "Ever been to one?" The straight dude said no. Joel said, "Then let someone cool answer, you nerd." That's pretty funny. At another point, Joel Kim Booster said straight male flight attendants aren't allowed to be rude, only the gay ones. We were told both jokes killed. And the SFGate says, after the show ended, Johnson drove off in a black Porsche Cayenne as a plump rat scurried by the venue's entrance. I'm curious how much such a Porsche runs. Oh, this is fun. You're going to love this answer. I don't know what number was in my head 2 seconds ago, but it was not this number. So again, let's just recap this story here. This was a fundraiser for the LA City Council candidate who's been endorsed by the LA chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. The SFGate tells us Zainab Johnson was one of the performers and that Johnson jumped in a Porsche Cayenne. I am now on finder.porsche.com/US/ a bunch of things. A 2026 Porsche Cayenne, chromite black metallic, goes for, are you ready? $100,595, excluding taxes and fees, estimated dealer fees $995. That is the price at Paul Miller Porsche in Parsippany, New Jersey. So perhaps your dealer has a better deal. And that seems to be the low end. The hybrid goes for $135. The Cayenne S Coupe goes for $143. But maybe it was a used Porsche Cayenne. Who knows? So I'm here on Edmunds.com. I can get a 2017 Porsche Cayenne for $16,985. So maybe she was driving a 9-year-old car. The SFGate was unclear, and I want to be fair here. A 2023 used one is going for $99,599, but you can get a 2014 for just $11,199. So who knows what she was driving? I drove a 92 Civic for 30 years, and I'm not kidding. Anyway, I don't know what today's show was, but it was different. That's your comedy news for today. Holiday weekend, everybody. See you tomorrow.